Constructive Thinking is a podcast by the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada. My name is Karen Renkema, and I'm the Vice President for PCA. Today, we will be talking with Stephen Hamilton, my colleague, and our Director of Public Affairs on the City of Toronto and a recent motion made at the City of Toronto regarding construction procurement. This program was taped on June 30th, 2026. I hope you enjoy. Hi, good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
I'd love to be able to say it's great to be back with you to do a podcast. I enjoy doing podcasts with you, but today, not so happy to discuss this issue that just happened only a few short days ago on June 24th at the City of Toronto. Very, very disappointing, surprising, non-transparent. We'll get into it, but happy to speak with you about it. Not so happy to report on this issue for our members and the broader industry and all the skilled trades workers in Ontario. So why don't we just dig right into it? I think perhaps some of our listeners might just start to be complacent about this, as do we sometimes. It's what does the City of Toronto do, and the continued drama at the City of Toronto. It's just, you continue to eye roll. But very impactful news from last week. Why don't you give us a short snippet, breaking news, and what happened at City Council the evening of June 24th?
Sure. So Toronto City Council was in the midst of debating the development charge rebate plan, and this is a plan that's largely funded by the provincial and federal governments, where it would rebate new purchasers of homes throughout the city to make it more affordable. So this was a kind of a very specific thing they were having a conversation about. The mayor made a walk-on motion that would grant LUNA 183 bargaining rights in the residential heavy construction, roadwork, and sewer water main sector, as well as 8 other building trade unions in the residential sector in the City of Toronto. So again, this was completely unrelated to the matter that was being discussed. It was a walk-on motion, so this was a surprise motion. There was no existing staff reports on this. There was no existing reach out to stakeholders. There was no previous debate. So this was fresh for all the councillors in the chamber that evening. And one of the councillors tried to rule it out of order because it has really nothing to do with development charge rebates, only very tangentially related and that's being generous. And the motion was debated for about 10 minutes. There was a vote called. 22 councillors voted in favor, 4 voted against it. And basically what this does is, as we all know, Toronto already had a very restrictive procurement system in place, the City of Toronto. That was in the ICI sector. So if you're building a police station or a community center, that work was already committed to building trade unions. And that's been the case for quite some time. There's a long history to that we'll probably get into. This basically extends those rights almost throughout the entire procurement system from the City of Toronto, which is a multi-billion-dollar procurement system year over year. The volume of work is obviously massive. It's the largest municipality in Ontario, obviously. So this was very surprising to us, obviously. Very disappointing they went in this direction, and certainly frustrating that it came about the way it did.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about the walk-on motion, and for those that are interested, we have shared a YouTube video, and we can share that by reaching out to us. But the dynamics are such that there was not a single councillor that was aware that this was happening. And even more interesting, Stephen, about 10 days prior to that, at the executive committee at City Council, the executive committee asked staff to do a report that requested a cost analysis of going building trades only in the residential sector. Can you talk? Let's split this topic out a little bit, residential and civil. Can you talk a little bit about what the residential sector is? This is not private built residential. This is City of Toronto owned residential that is or is not Toronto Community Housing.
As far as we understand it, this is not Toronto Community Housing Corporation. That is covered under an existing agreement. A lot of that work is already closed for TCHC. We can link to those requirements. It's not completely locked down as far as I'm aware, but the vast majority of work at TCHC is locked down by building trade unions. But yes, the residential work in this motion is just that procured directly by the City of Toronto. So they recently created an agency that was set up a couple of years ago to produce affordable housing. Some of it is through partnerships with existing developers. Some is procured directly by the City of Toronto. So it only covers the procurement work for new residential directly procured by the City of Toronto. So it's not a huge portfolio, and it is a new type of development the city's entering into. So the scale of the residential piece in this motion is not as significant, I would say, compared to the city granting Local 183 exclusive rights in sewer and water main and road construction. There was an existing motion looking at the city's residential program. As far as I'm aware, looking at it, there's been no staff reports on that motion that was tabled a year ago. So again, for both residential and for civil in this motion from last week, there's been literally zero staff reports and analysis on moving in this direction. So it's, for the taxpayers of Toronto, this is deeply discouraging for transparency, for democracy, for all those things. This is a very negative move by the City of Toronto. At least if they're going in this direction, they should know the costs associated with it. The way the debate unfolded was primarily focused around health and safety. The argument being from Mayor Chow is that unionized workers, specifically, I suppose, these unionized workers, are safer than other workers. This, of course, is absurd. The City of Toronto has existing health and safety accreditation requirements in place. There's an extensive pre-qualification process to bid on work in the City of Toronto. So they have all those screens done already for contractors that are working in the City of Toronto. So this does nothing to address safety. This is clearly a red herring and a talking point that isn't grounded in any accuracy. I would say also there was some talk about wages as well. Again, the City of Toronto has a fair wage policy, which basically replicates wage rates for building trade. So this has nothing to do with either safety or wages. It's exclusively about giving a favor to certain unions, I guess the mayor's preferred unions, and unfortunately, councillors weren't equipped with information to provide them with much ability to push back.
Yeah, you started talking about the politics of this a little bit, but I think the politics of this is extremely important in that, let's go back to 2019 just really quickly. So in 2018, late 2018, Bill 66 was presented at the Ontario Legislature, and what it allowed for is cities to get out of kind of what we would say the stronghold that unions had on particular cities, being able to open their procurement practices to all contractors, regardless of that contractor's union affiliation. So you could have non-union, you could have CLAC, you could have the Carpenters, you could have LAUNA, you could have many different contractors competing in most cities, but there were some cities, some of the larger ones, Region of Waterloo, which is a region, City of Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, Toronto, TDSB, TCHC, all of them had a restriction on them. It was presumed that they were a construction employer. So we won't get into all the nitty-gritty dynamics of the construction procurement legalese here, but basically these municipalities were not able to solicit bids from any contractors that were not signatory to specific unions, in some case one union. In 2019, the legislation passed, but it had an addition added to it last minute, and it allowed cities to choose whether they wanted to continue a restricted bidding system or be able to contract to all qualified contractors. The qualified term is very important here because municipalities, cities, and the province can deem who is qualified. They do an extensive pre-qualification for contractors. As Stephen just mentioned, City of Toronto, but Ministry of Transportation does, Regional Waterloo does. And so the qualified contractors, regardless of their labor affiliation, could then go bid on all these the legislation allowed these qualified contractors to be able to bid. So all these municipalities at City Council agreed, said, yes, absolutely, we want more bidders, we want more workers, 100%, and we want lower costs because competition just innately drives lower costs. Except for the City of Toronto. In 2019, the City of Toronto said, oh, we kind of like our little cozy relationship with the building trades. It's existed for a long time. Why would we change it? And not only did they say, it's okay, we don't want to get out of a restricted regime, they went one step further in 2019, and a walk-on motion at that time was tabled to allow LIUNA exclusive rights to construction laborers in the IC&I sector. At that time, the city gave only a monopoly access to LIUNA in the IC&I sector, not residential, not roads and bridges, sewer, water main. Although we recognize that that was something that LIUNA was asking for at that time and they did not get. So fast forward now to the spring, almost summer, I guess it's summer, of 2026, less than 4 months before a municipal election. Very quietly, a chamber stacked with LIUNA members during debate, and all of a sudden a walk-on motion comes on again. And it flies in the face of transparency. It flies in the face of, like Stephen said, and democracy. For taxpayers, I mean, we've assessed just the cost of what the current restrictions are, not even the new restriction, but just the current restrictions is approximately $347 million a year. Now add on these other 4 or 5 sectors. We'd only be guessing, we'd have to guess that it's double the cost of restricting competition in those sectors as well. And that can all be done within 5 minutes. Stephen, do you have any comments on kind of the politics of where this maybe came from and where do you think it's going to go?
Certainly there's been a lot of pressure on City Council within those unions. 183 specifically is a very political union. During debate last week, they filled the chamber. As you mentioned, they did this previously as well with their workers. And so they're very active within the City of Toronto. The politics of this, Mayor Chow introduced the motion, so that obviously provides more weight than another councillor introducing the motion. Folks on this call know this, whether it's planning, whether it's procurement. The staff are sometimes more important than the councillors in a lot of cases. This had no existing debate. So it seems to us that this was purely a politically designed. And we can talk about kind of what happens next, but certainly the fact that the election is happening in a few months in the City of Toronto is not lost on us. This wasn't introduced 2 years ago. This was introduced almost immediately or right kind of in the middle of an election period. And so it seems to us this was a political motion.
And further, I always maintain this question every time I have this conversation with a counselor. It's like, why do certain unions need to have a monopoly? Why are they so afraid of competition? Why can they not compete? Particularly when wage rates are the same across the sector. They need to be because of the shortage of skilled tradespeople. Why can they not innovate to be able to compete in this sector? Why do they need to continue to use regulatory capture to monopolize all the work out there? Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, Stephen. Why don't you tell us what's going to happen next on this, and maybe just a little bit of an overview on what PCA is going to do.
So the motion does not come into force immediately. So I'll read from the motion kind of what it says for next steps and how we're interpreting that, and maybe how it will play out. But part of the motion, this is the end of the motion, it says, City Council requests the City Manager report to the Executive Committee in the first quarter of 2027 with an update on the status of negotiations of the voluntary recognition agreements in the recommendations and an anticipated timeline to their conclusion. So, again, it's not, this doesn't come into force immediately, so it's up to the City Manager to negotiate this motion that would give a voluntary recognition agreement with those building trades and then provide an update in less than a year on the status of those. So this is similar to the motion that was provided, as Karen mentioned, in 2019 that Anna Bilal brought forward that asked the city manager for a voluntary recognition agreement with LUNA for the IC&I sector. So this is doing basically the same thing. The city eventually did get a voluntary recognition agreement with LUNA for ICI, but there's a lot. Again, the city manager has quite a bit of autonomy here. Certainly, it's something we'll talk about next steps, but it's certainly our intention to reach out to the city manager to make him aware of obviously our issue on this. We think there's autonomy that the city manager has as part of this VRA. If the conditions that the union is seeking are egregious, I don't think the City of Toronto should sign it. As part of the council motion, for instance, it mentions project thresholds and exemptions to protect the participation of small construction companies, including a value threshold and an exemption for sole proprietors and small firms. So there is language that within the directions to the city manager that would provide him with the ability to that would give him scope to negotiate. And so it's our contention that the city manager really should be looking at these with a view on affordability, value for taxpayers' dollars, and fairness. And so that's next step. So nothing immediately will happen on this, likely until early 2027.
Yeah, and to underline, they'll be at the negotiating table, and it's always just a question of how much willpower does the city have to go through these, like Stephen named, a number of the items that need to be considered in the voluntary recognition agreement. So the question is whether the city feels like they're armed with enough information to sit at the negotiating table and ensure that the City of Toronto gets the best deal for their taxpayers, but also the skilled workers that reside in the City of Toronto that would like to work on projects that their tax dollars pay for.
Let's keep in mind, too, a lot of the work that the city is procuring, it's a very aging infrastructure in the City of Toronto. It's very specialized work. So in many cases, there are contractors, maybe not affiliated with PCA, maybe they are, that are doing the work that is highly specialized, and there's really little or no competition in that space. So there really should be consideration for certain types of civil work that is specialized, that where the company may not be signatory to those unions. So there's so many different factors at play that a straight reading of this voluntary recognition agreement would really throw the plans for a lot of contractors that are currently eligible to do the work and currently do the work very competently. City of Toronto procurement has, as we talked about, been a long-standing issue. They didn't have the whole pie before. They basically have the whole pie now. And so we have existing communications vehicles on this. So there's a website called Fair and Open TO, which we will link to, that asks taxpayers in Toronto to contact their local councillor. There's a very simplified form that kind of auto-generates that goes to their local councillor and the mayor to let them know their opposition to closed tendering. Again, no other municipality in Ontario has this system. So this is really a Toronto problem. So there's that existing thing in place. We're also reaching out to members of council, obviously, to let them know our views on this, especially the councillors that voted against it. We're reaching out to mayoral candidates to make sure we're all clear on where we're all standing before the election on this issue. But this is, I think, a seminal issue in the municipal election in Toronto from our perspective, just because it is so political and it is so, again, done without any prior research. So we'll be very active on this as the election kind of moves forward. Our plans will update folks on this podcast in the future about what we're doing, but certainly it was a surprise to us in that the resolution itself, but not a surprise in that this is kind of how the City of Toronto operates.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but again, like you said, like we're all kind of, I guess, used to waking up to news from the City of Toronto and doing the eye roll and moving on. Unfortunately, for City of Toronto taxpayers, more is owed to them, more is owed to the skilled workers in the city of Toronto. And, quite frankly, for a thriving construction industry to continue across Ontario, we can't have the largest municipality locking contractors and workers out just because of the type of union card they hold. Thanks today for this, Stephen. Much appreciated. We will keep our members up to date on this. And for those of you that are not members, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We're always happy to have a very invigorating conversation about this topic. Thank you.
The opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent or the program host.